Go ahead and clean these up and we'll get them on the stove and have a really nice dinner tonight. What is up, guys? This is Zach from Anglers Escape, and today I want to make a video on trout fishing for the beginner. Now, when I go trout fishing, there's a few tips that I use that have really helped me catch a lot more trout over the years. You don't need a fancy fly rod to start out. You can really just take any bass rod, any rod in general, even crappie fishing, an open-faced or closed-faced rod. And I want to show you how to go after the trout with both bait and lures. And so if you're a beginner, get a light action rod because trout are pretty finicky, so they like small pound test line. So that's one key to catching them is your test line. You want about 4-pound test line, maybe 6-pound test line, because they're very sight oriented, so they'll see that line very easily and be spooked off. And then usually a 6 to 6.5 foot light action rod that has a lot of nice bend in it. And a lot of times you get these at Walmart for only maybe 20 bucks for a combo for a rod and reel, something pretty small. And then if you're going to be using bait as a beginner, this setup has caught me unbelievable amounts of trout. And I'm going to show you guys a bunch of catches later on in this video that were just taken in the last couple weeks. But this is the setup that I love to use for bait. And basically I have my 4-pound test line, then I have a really small bullet weight that can freely slide up and down my main line. So if the trout starts taking the bait, they don't feel any resistance initially. Then I have a small swivel that stops my sinker. And so when I cast out, this is going to sit on the bottom like this. And then about 4 to 6 inches up, I'm going to have a nice, really small hook. You can see the size of this hook right here. And after this, I'll show you where I got these hooks. And these can be anywhere from size 12 to maybe size 4 hooks. Then another 6 to 12 inches up, I put a second hook on. So this way I can use 2 different baits because sometimes they can steal your baits. This way also, I always use baits that float, and I'll show you those baits in a second. So on the bottom, my weight and swivel will be sitting here, then floating up off the bottom right where the trout are, because trout love to hang out at the bottom of ponds, rivers, streams. I'm going to have my first hook, so it's floating 6 to 8 inches off the bottom, and then another 6 to 8 inches up, I have my last hook that's going to be now about 12 to 18 inches off the bottom. So then what I do is I always go out with a variety of trout baits. The main key is that they float. I found that Berkeley Power Bait is one of the best trout baits out there. And you can see they're just come in these little balls. They stay on the hook extremely well and they float. And so you always want to get something that floats because those trout usually don't like to take baits that are sitting on the bottom. Even before I cast these out, I'm making sure that my bait is floating off the bottom. So then what I do is I take one of these little baits and I hook it on just like that onto the hook. So now it's floating just off the bottom. You can see how tiny that hook is, but trout are really scared of big hooks and long and thick pound test line. So again, try to use about 4-pound test line and really small hooks. Then with the other one, what I usually do is take a different type of trout bait. So here's another one that I picked up at Walmart. Again, it's just a floating one. And then sometimes I'll put on a little bit more. So I might put on a couple pieces on this hook. But again, the key is, I'll pick those up here in a second. But the key here is that these are all floating trout baits. And I'm using 2 different types. So maybe they don't like this one, then maybe they'll go for this one. Or maybe they strip this bait and then they see this one floating up here, then they'll go for this one. This also allows me to fish at 2 different depths. So I'm fishing 4 to 6 inches off the bottom, as well as 12 inches to 18 inches off the bottom. So then as soon as I cast that out, if you really want to increase your odds to catch more trout, I'll cast this out, let it sit in the water, then I'll use my second pole that'll have a lure on it. Because some days the trout will only be biting on baits, some days they'll only be biting on lures, and some days they're biting on both, so this will really increase your odds. So with my second pole, I just tie on with 4-pound test line one of the 3 lures that I'll show you right here. So my favorite all-time lure for trout is just a simple inline spinner. They don't get much better than this. A lot of good inline spinners won't even twist your line if you don't put on a swivel beforehand. Some of my favorite brands for an inline spinner are Panther Martin, which is this one right here. This is a size 2 Panther Martin, or this is a South Bend spinner, and Blue Fox are other good spinners. In the video description, I'll put a link to where you can get Panther Martin inline spinners. But all you do is just tie this onto your main line, cast out, and you want to reel it in just fast enough that the blade's spinning. No faster, no slower. Every once in a while you can give it a little jerk, but pretty steady retrieve, just fast enough so you notice that blade spinning around. The second lure that I would highly recommend is some sort of jig. Trout magnets are an excellent jig, and what you'll do is you'll put on one of these trout magnets about anywhere from 2 to 5 feet under a bobber, and you'll cast it out and slowly jig it back. So what I mean by jigging is you jerk your pole just a little bit, and then you let it sit, and then you reel in a little bit, and then you jerk your pole a little bit and let it sit. So it just looks like it's bouncing around like a little minnow as you reel it in. And lures, you're always going to be slowly retrieving. So these baits, once you cast them out, you just let them sit and you let them stay there. These lures, you're constantly reeling in, trying to mimic a real minnow, so those trout bite it. And the third lure that I really love for trout also are just really small crankbaits. So Rebel makes some really good small ones. They also have some barbless ones. So some waters you are not allowed to use barbed hooks for trout. So these are really nice, but you can see they're all really small. You don't want any crankbait bigger than this because trout usually are taking pretty small baits. This one represents little crawfish. Here's a little grasshopper. But these are some excellent little crankbaits. So those are the 3 lures I'd use. The inline spinners are my favorite. Before I end this video, I want to talk about also the hooks. I'm going to, in the link video description, I'll put a link for these hooks on Amazon. You can get about 500 for about $5, and they're perfect because they're all those really small hooks I was talking about. You can see how small they are here compared to my fingers, and they're a variety pack, and they're perfect for those trout baits. So trout like these really small hooks like this, and when you get 500 for $5, you can't go wrong. And again, I'll put the link for these hooks in the video description. But guys, I hope you learned something here today, and I've caught tons of trout using this mechanism. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the clips, and as always, best of luck fishing. All right, I think we have a fish on. It's a lunker, first trout of the year. Got him on power baits using a 2-hook setup. That'll be a nice little dinner. I might go down and grab him real quick just so he doesn't break the line. We're using 4-pound test line. There's some of the power bait. Cut him on the top hook. And that's a nice rainbow right there. Alright guys, trout number 2. Quite a bit smaller than the last one, but got him on the power bait. Still a keeper size. It's another rainbow trout. As you can see by his color, he's got a nice little stripe right here. Typical of the rainbow trout. Sometimes I stock some brown trout in here. But we're using pretty small size 6 hooks and another good fish. Get him on the stringer. Guys, fish number 3. Another one on power baits. Not a bad one. Get him up here real quick. It's a good sized one. Another rainbow. And there we go. Beautiful rainbow trouts. First day of March, we got a trout on. It's actually, yeah, nice. Looks like a rainbow trout. 4-pound test line using some Berkeley power bait just floating off the bottom. Gonna grab him here in a second. I better grab him down here. Otherwise he might break the line since we're using such a low-pound test line. Hey, it's a good one. Got one on. Looks like another. Yeah. Probably going to be another trout considering using trout bait. Feels pretty good though. Oh yeah. We got a biter. Alright. Man, this guy's really going after it. Taking a little bit of drag. Alright, good second fish right here.
Yeah, another rainbow.
Beautiful rainbow trout. You can see the bait right here, Berkeley power bait. Whenever you're going trout fishing, 2 things is you can't go wrong with some floating Berkeley power bait, and then also if you want, you can throw a couple lures. He popped right off there. But that's a good fish. We'll get him on the stringer with the other one that's real lively. Got a nice dinner tonight. All right, guys, got 3 nice rainbow trouts. Might catch another one before we're done, but we're about to clean them. Here's the bait I was using. It's a little power bait. The main key is that you get some that are floating. So basically you have your weight, and then 6 inches up you have your hook, so it floats about 6 inches off the bottom. I have a bunch of hooks I bought off Amazon. You can get these little hook packs for $5 or $6, and it comes with hundreds of these small little hooks, which are perfect for trout. And then I was using 4-pound test line. So go ahead and clean these up, and we'll get them on the stove and have a really nice dinner tonight. All right, so we just got back with all the trout. We cooked them at 375 for about 15 minutes. The big one took closer to 20 minutes. Already polished off 2 of the trouts, but you can see it's done whenever it flakes real easy. So I can take a little fork and you can see the meat just peels right off the bone. When it's really flaky like that, you know it's done. Excellent taste. We put a little bit of seasoning on it, but great fish, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And as always, best of luck fishing.